Hey guys, how you doing? It's Tom. Hey, listen, in this video, I wanted to talk about uh, things that we don't hear much on, especially on YouTube. Uh, I watch a lot of vloggers, and and obviously before I came here, even before I came here to visit, even okay, 7 years ago, I started watching Philippine vloggers. Like I don't know, maybe 6 months before I came or something like that. I'm not sure the exact timeline, but around that time frame. And and I continuously have watched them. I mean, there's like a handful of them, probably a lot of them that I watch. Maybe 5 to 10 different people. And they're and I just watched one recently. Uh, a guy that I watch a lot. Every man has a story. Mark, and he I guess he gave me a good idea and then I was talking to Amy about it, uh, basically while we're eating breakfast, and she brought up some really good points that we don't often hear about. You know what I mean? Like with what's going on. Like obviously the Philippines has been open since February, like mid-February, right? So there's been a decent amount of influx of Westerners coming here who've been waiting to come to the Philippines, for all throughout the pandemic, right? For the last 2.5 years, or whatever, right? Even up to 3 years probably, right? I'm hearing stories like, Mark was talking about guys, just guys making mistakes, right? Like, guys sending like a lot of money to their online girlfriend, before they've even met. Keep in mind, before they've even met, sending them like a lot of money, and then getting here, and then unfortunately, it's like, one of them, I guess, built a house, the family moved in, and then when the Westerner shows up, she's like, "Hey, this isn't working out. I think you need to leave," type thing. And guess what? The house is in her name. Everything's in her name, because that's how the laws are here. You can't really own land in the Philippines, okay, as a Westerner or as a foreigner, not just a Westerner, but a foreigner. You can own a condo, you know, but you can't own a house, or you can't own the real estate. Technically, you could buy a house, right? And own the house or whatever, but you're not going to own the land that it's on. So, you know, just so you know, right? So anyway, so he was talking about some of these stories, and I was like, wow, and I've heard a lot of them. You always hear from the man's standpoint, kind of, right? Like, oh, they came here, and then either it didn't work out, right? Which is like, okay, whatever. I mean, no harm done financially, right? If it was just one of those things where they showed up and just after a week or two, they're just like, nah, there's no chemistry, there's no this, there's no that, whatever, right? And that's like not the end of the world, okay, Um, but if you're coming here and you're putting all your eggs in one basket, you know what I mean? Like you're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna come there, I'm gonna build a house, and I'm gonna live with this woman, and you never even met her. That's obviously a mistake, I mean, why would you do that? But anyway, I guess I'm getting to a point here, and it's like, uh, I, you know, there's here. Let me just give you a couple of examples of what there's women here, okay, that aren't scammers, and they're just legitimately looking for a boyfriend, and they're not all like 20 years old or whatever, 25 years old. Some of them are in their 40s, and right. And I'm seeing some stories from them in some other social media outlets, not really YouTube that much, but in other social media outlets, and they're talking about their disillusionment, right, with the men, you know. And there's a couple of things that I want to talk about, and one of them is kind of funny in a way. You don't think about it right away, but there was like one of the big issues, right, with some of these couples, if you want to call them that, is that the guy doesn't have good hygiene you know, practices like, I mean, after they come here, they're here and they're with their Filipina, their online girlfriend that they met, even if they've been, talking to each other online and sort of been a couple for like a year or even 2 years, right? Whatever. Well, guess what? You can't smell somebody online, like on video chat, you can't smell them, right? It sounds crazy, but I never thought about this. You know what I mean? Like as an issue, but man, it certainly could be, right? And is, apparently it is an issue. Now listen, if you've been, you're stuck in the U.S. for 2.5, 3 years, right, during the pandemic, and if you're somebody that's like works from home, right, maybe you're working from home, and you really haven't had a situation where you really had to be around people that much, right? Except maybe when you went to this, if you're single now, I'm just kind of going, if you're a single guy, I don't care how old you are, I don't care if you're 25 or 65, but if you were somehow in that situation where you were able to work from home during the pandemic, and you were being cautious, and so you weren't around people that much, right? Except when you went to the store, or whatever. Well, you could easily, when you work from home, you could easily sort of fall into a routine where maybe you forget to take a shower, or whatever. And keep in mind, ladies in the Philippines, keep in mind that if you're coming from the northern half of the United States, it doesn't get hot like this, okay? If you're from like Minnesota or something, like it's generally not going to be, the summertime is very short and there's more cold weather than warm weather or hot weather, okay? So when you're living in those circumstances, you don't tend to really get sweaty or, you know what I mean? You're not going to get sweaty and smelly that much unless you really hardly ever, if you really take a shower like once a week or something, then, I suppose you could, you know what I mean? It could be a problem even if you're from a cold weather area, But I guess my point is like here it's hot every day, hot, hot, hot. So people take showers every day, sometimes 2, 3 times a day. They take showers here. Okay, it's just a part of the life. Whereas if you're from a northern city or something like that, there's like 6, 7 months out of the year where it's cold, and you don't necessarily have to, especially if you're working from home, and you're not really doing physical exertion, and you're not going to really smell bad, or you're not going to necessarily need to take a shower every single day, or especially 2 or 3 times a day, right? So this is just, I guess I'm trying to explain a little bit from maybe a guy's standpoint in this situation. But guys, come on. If you I understand, like I said, if you've been alone for a long time and you kind of weren't around a lot of people, and so you kind of let yourself go a little bit, right? You're wearing a mask when you go out, so you don't have to shave as much. Maybe you forget to brush your teeth, whatever, and stuff like that. But if you're gonna come here to the Philippines and meet your girlfriend that you've been talking with and video chatting with for, 1 year, 2 year, even 6 months, whatever. If you're going to take the trouble and the time and the trouble to come here and meet, this girlfriend, why would you not, you have to clean. You have to be clean, dudes. You have to be like somewhat hygienic, man. You got to take a shower every day. You got to brush your teeth every day and stuff like that. And it's just something that when Amy mentioned that to me about these some women that have been talking about this online, and it's like I never thought of that. You know what I mean? Like you're video chatting, and so obviously you don't get to smell the person, unless they come out with smell-o-vision. Remember that Kentucky Fried movie? Like, feel around. The guy would stand next to the guy watching a movie at a theater, and whenever the actress slapped the actor on the movie, the guy would slap the guy watching the movie, sitting in the seat watching the movie. It was like feel around or something they called it. Everything that was happening on screen, you would actually feel it, at the theater. Like some guy would be there, like a butler almost, and be slapping you and doing all this stuff. It just reminded me of that. Anyway, but yeah, the bottom line is, man, you gotta, if you're gonna come here, you have to remember, hey, now you can't just, you're not working from home anymore. You're not like, being just alone. You know what I mean? Now you're coming here, you're gonna be with somebody. You gotta take care of yourself. Think about them too. They don't want to smell you. Like, if you let yourself literally get, that bad where you're smelling bad, I mean, that's, what do you expect? Like, that's not going to work out well. You know what I mean? So, and like I said, this is just something that you'll never hear, because you're always hearing about the guys that come over here and, get either get scammed or whatever you want to call it, right? But a lot of times I think it's embarrassing too for the guys, right? Because it's not making them look good either, the fact that they did these things. Because guess what? There's guys out there like Mark and Old Dog that have been telling you not to do that. You know what I mean? Like, there's like vloggers, Rike, that have been telling you for years, literally years, not just for the last 3 months, or whatever, or since the country's been open, but for a long time, they've been telling you guys, hey, don't do that. Don't send a lot of money to a woman. Come here and meet them first. You know what I mean? Like, don't just rely on video chat and then fall in love and then make all your plans to uproot your whole life and come over here to live from the US or whatever based on just video chats. You know what I mean? That's not smart, and I understand, like these guys always talk about feeling invisible in the United States, older guys, especially, you're over 40 or 50, right? As a man, you're single, divorced, whatever. They always say, oh, I feel invisible, this and that. And then I come to the Philippines and all these beautiful women are, throwing themselves at me or whatever. You know what I mean? And obviously, and that's one thing, right? But if you're already coming here, in other words, if you're coming here first, at least, before you sort of get into some kind of major commitment and start sending a woman a bunch of money, like I said, come here and meet the woman. You know what I mean? Don't spend time with them. You know what I mean? Spend at least 3 weeks with them. Like, you gotta spend time together, 24/7. You know what I mean? Not just like, oh, a couple hours a day or or something like that. You know what I mean? You gotta spend literally 24/7 with them to really start to know that there's chemistry there and that if you're made for each other or not. You know what I mean? So that's the one thing, right? Now this is the other thing, and this is interesting too. This is a cultural this is a cultural thing. Um, okay, so all right, so here's the other point, right? And this is interesting too. I mean, this is even more kind of interesting, and you don't often hear about it a lot, you know. In the Filipino culture, okay, it's kind of like the way I grew up almost. That's another reason why guys come here a lot of times. Guys, 60, 70 years old or whatever, or certainly over 50, right? That sort of 50 to 70 age range, because a lot of things here are very similar to like the ways that the family structures that were going on when we were growing up. A lot of us, not all of us, but like, okay, like for example, and this is the main point here in Filipino culture, the woman usually handles the money. You know what I mean? So in other words, the man makes the money and works, goes out, works, makes the money, comes home, gives it to the wife or girlfriend or whatever, and she handles the money. Buys the food, buys this, buys that. Does everything else basically. You know what I mean? And it used to be like that in the U.S. Okay, I mean, it was pretty much, especially like in the 50s and even in the 60s, and kind of in the at least half of the 70s, at least, right? Or you could probably say most of the 70s if you want to be nice about it, And that's when things started changing, like in the 70s, where, and especially like in the 80s and by the 90s, women were working, Okay, like really, I would probably, if I had to pick a decade where it really took off, I'd probably say the 80s. That's when women in the U.S. started working a lot. You know what I mean? Where it was almost equal amount of, you know, almost, or, you know, equal amount of women working to men working. Okay, so in other words, the households in the U.S., especially currently, like now, and you know, like I said, probably since the 80s and or 90s, consist of, you know, a husband and a wife that both work. Okay, so it's not quite the way it used to be, where oh, the man comes home and just gives all the money to the woman, and the woman, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, I'm sure there's some situations where the man handles all the money because maybe the woman's not great with the money. You know, like, you know what I mean? Maybe whatever, she just never learned how to you know, budget money, or you know, maybe her mother never was good at it, and so now she's not that good at it. You know, I'm talking about like in the West or in the U.S. specifically. But for, you know, but you know what I'm saying? So it's not automatic that in the US, and it's certainly not the culture, the modern culture, where the man just gives the woman all the money, you know. Here, yeah, you pay all the bills and you do this and you do that. They kind of do things evenly, you know what I mean? Like they sort of, you know what I mean? They'll have joint bank accounts, joint credit cards and stuff like that, but they don't necessarily, it doesn't automatically go to the woman, you know, her responsibility to pay all the bills and everything. You know what I mean? It's not like a, you know, it's not an automatic thing. Kind of like the way it used to be. You know, I mean, it was that way. Like I said, when I was a kid, that's how it was. My dad worked, and he had his own business, but he worked hard. He wasn't like a white collar guy. He was definitely a blue collar guy, but you know, he made enough money. He was a milkman in Chicago, okay, in the 50s and 60s and into the 70s. And then in the 70s, milk delivery became almost null and void. And I'm talking about, you know, just people having milk and other dairy products delivered to their home every morning. That really stopped like in the mid 70s. You know, I mean, it really cut down big time and almost completely stopped. You know, by the end of the 70s. So that business wasn't really good anymore, unless you were wholesale. If you were a milkman and you only delivered to restaurants and stuff like that, and you know, then fine, you could stay in business. But if my dad, most of his business was just, you know, customers, regular customers, not wholesale or whatever, you know, like restaurants. He had a few, but you know. So anyway, when I was growing up, you know, my mom never had to work, okay, and she raised four boys, you know, right, without really her having to work. I think she got a part-time job maybe once or maybe twice, but I mean, she didn't need to. She was just, we were getting a little older. I was the youngest, and maybe I was at an age where, you know, she didn't have to watch me, or you know, as much or whatever. You know what I mean? So she, for a short time, she got a part-time jobs or whatever, but she never needed to, you know. And but now, like I said, in the modern, you know, you got a guy coming from the U.S., right? A guy that's 50, 60, whatever years old, you know, and you're coming to the Philippines. That's not an automatic thing. In other words, women here are, one of their complaints is that, hey, he's not, when he comes here to live, even though we're living together, he's coming here to live. He's not just visiting. He's not sort of giving me a salary or, you know, money. You know what I mean? Like the way they normally do here. You know. And I'm just trying to give the standpoint of both standpoints here. You know, why women or Filipinas are expecting that, because it's part of their culture. You know, it still is part of their culture. You know, the way things work here. You know, generally, that's why they are like, why aren't you doing that? Yeah. But I'm trying to give the, from the Western guy's standpoint too, is that it's not necessarily like that anymore in the U.S. You know, and I'm sure other Western countries. So, you know what I mean? So it's not like, oh yeah, just, you know, pay all the bills, honey, and you know, whatever. Because they've had to either, especially if they're single, if they've been single for a long time, then they've been managing their own finances for who knows how long. Could be 10 years, could be 20 years, whatever. So they don't have even a wife or a living girlfriend or something that's going to be able to, to do that for them. So you have a lot more. It's kind of weird. It's not as it's fractured. Okay, the familial structure in the U.S. is a lot more fractured than it is here. So you got a lot of high rate of divorce. You got 50% divorce rate in the U.S. Okay, so guess what? Now you got people that are single. You got women that are single, and often with children, and then you got men that are single, and older men too. Well, they're paying their own bills. You know what I mean? They're not handing money over to anybody. They can't. They're by themselves. So that's that's the reason why we don't automatically, if you come here to live with with the Filipino, we don't automatically just give them all our give them a salary or whatever you want to call it, allowance, like right away, because it's just not, we have to sort of settle in here for a while to the culture, and then before we start doing that. But I just thought those were two aspects from a woman's standpoint, the lack of hygiene, right, from some of these guys, which I never even thought about that. You know what I mean? Like, and then of course the cultural differences that the Filipinas are used to just handling all the money here. You know what I mean? Like, and especially if it is an older Filipina. You know what I mean? If it's a Filipina that's in her mid-30s and above, and has, especially a mother, single mother, whatever, right? Then she's really going to be used to that. You know what I mean? Like, but even when they're married, they don't have to be a single mother to be handling all the money. Even when they're married and everything's fine between the husband and wife, that's how it works here. The husband generally gives the money to the wife, and she pays all the bills and takes care of all that stuff, buys the food and all that stuff, right? School supplies, whatever for the kids, whatever. So, so they're expecting that. You know what I mean? Like, you have a single mother or something like that that's going to meet a Westerner for the first time, after video chatting or whatever, and they're sort of going to be expecting that because that's their culture. So I just thought I would address this, because it's not something you hear about a lot. You only hear about, oh, the guys that come over here, that whatever, it didn't work, it doesn't work out, and they put all their eggs in one basket, and it's mistakes from the guy's standpoint. There's no excuse for that, like, and there's plenty of information out there on YouTube, and most of these guys have been watching vloggers. You know what I mean? They don't just come here cold. They don't just come here with no info. Most of them, they're watching vlogs. Believe me, before they come here, and they're not listening. Because if they're still making those mistakes, they're still, just, wow, I'm going to send her a bunch of money and we're going to build a house and this and that, and then I'm going to get there and we're going to be happily ever after, and they haven't even met. I mean, that's the crazy thing. So anyway, just another facet of living in the Philippines that I thought I would touch on. I think that I'm going to do another video about the budget, not necessarily our budget or whatever, because I could do that, but I mean, I kind of want to just talk more generalities about what you should have as far as income, and what you should maybe have in the bank and stuff if you're really planning on living here, and stuff like that. But that'll be in the next video. So, all right, guys, that's about it. Don't forget to like, hopefully, comment, and subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. But I appreciate it. And yeah, if you got any comments, man, I'd love to hear them too. Thanks. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.